Keith, you ready? Okay. Good afternoon, guys. I want to thank you all for being here today. I'm joined by my first assistant, Ned McGowan, and the Chief of Juvenile, Assistant DEA, Diane Pugh. We're here to discuss the juvenile justice system and more particularly the court's use of electronic monitoring. As you all are aware, there are currently no uniform protocols, standards, or rules that my office, the rest of the system, or the general public can easily rely on. There's very little transparency about when and how juvenile defendants are released and under what conditions or how or if they will actually be monitored when they're given these electronic monitorings. We believe specific public ask to be prudent at this time for juvenile court, the juvenile justice system, and the city as well. With regards to juvenile court, in light of recent events, the DA's office is calling for all juvenile court judges to conduct hearings on all juvenile defendants who are currently under any form of electronic monitoring, to evaluate these defendants to determine whether or not they are compliant or non-compliant. We're further asking that any defendants found to be non-compliant or in violation of the terms and conditions of that court-ordered release on ankle monitor, we're asking they be taken into custody. Moving forward, any juvenile defendant that is court-ordered to be released on an ankle monitor, we're asking that require real-time monitoring and that reports are read on the record by judges when there are violations in court so that actions can be taken. We're also asking for a set of mutually agreed upon standards for mandatory revocations and remand. We sent a letter encompassing these requests in July, and we have yet to receive any response to date, which is why we find ourselves in this position making this public ask today. Simply put, juvenile court needs transparency. It needs transparency in sentencing and release protocols. There must be accountability and strict adherence to rules of supervised release and electronic monitoring. With regards to the juvenile court jail, JJIC, we also need guardrails in place in that institution so that JJIC does not take any unilateral actions outside of a courtroom to change, modify, or step down supervision of any of the conditions of any defendants, which is what we know occurred in the case of the defendant currently charged with taking the life of Mrs. Thibodeau. JJIC must be required to notify the public, the court, the DA's office, and the NOPD in any case of any escape, or if a violent individual is released on supervision, takes any action to avoid monitoring or supervision, or any sort of tampering at all of any sort of electronic monitoring device. Secondly, with regards to the city, in light of a letter from the mayor's administration dated some 2 years ago, in which the mayor's office, through the criminal justice commissioner's office, said that the mayor's office was taking control of juvenile electronic monitoring, we are calling for an operational audit of where the administration's 2-year endeavor stands on this electronic monitoring program. And we're also asking for a full review of any funds allocated for this public safety purpose over 2 years ago. The past 3 years coming out of the pandemic have been extremely challenging for America's young people, especially in urban settings like New Orleans. We have all lived through a very violent crime surge that has actually involved some of our young people. Our juveniles and the public have never needed investments in this area more. The lengthy delay in the use of these funds over the past 2 years is completely unacceptable. And we need immediate transparent action. We need immediate transparency to whatever actions are taken next. I say immediate because this not only affects past cases, but it affects cases that are coming on Diane's docket at juvenile court next week and the week after that. If this money is not spent wisely and not spent soon and has to be returned, it would be a sin and ashamed to have the resources necessary to deal with this issue and to not have spent it. My team and I have been working with stakeholders and Council President Moreno to craft and put forward legislation to codify protocols so that whatever solutions we can develop with regards to electronic monitoring can outlive us all and be codified. Tomorrow morning at 10:30, I look forward to joining the Governor and the Attorney General at the Capitol for an OJJ summit to discuss and coordinate what state measures can be taken to address this very pressing and clear and present danger. Goals of the summit: protocols, codifying this in a way so that it's institutionalized. These things should not change from mayor to mayor. It shouldn't change from councilmanic term to councilmanic term, or DA to DA, or governor to governor. These are systems that need to be put in place to keep the public safe in perpetuity. With that, I'll take any on-topic questions, Keith.
I know you talked about lack of oversight and accountability and transparency. I know you have scrutinized the monitoring program when it came to juveniles in the past, because a lot of these juveniles have become repeat offenders. I mean, what are you hoping to accomplish with this next step and calling for the accountability?
Well, number one, I want to make it clear that electronic monitoring is not a panacea, it's not a silver bullet, and it doesn't work for every defendant. I don't believe it should be used for violent offenders. I think we need to be very careful about which cases we use it on. However it is to be used in court, it has to have real-time monitoring. And when there is a violation, that can't be left in a file over at JJIC or left in a file on a judge's desk. It needs to be read in court. There has to, we have to have that degree of accountability. Victims need to know when a defendant is not where he was told to be. And frankly, that juvenile, he needs that degree of accountability so that he can grow and develop to be a better person than he was when he came into the system. And if the adults who are processing him, who have ordered his release, don't take the steps to hold him accountable, I fear that it will cause even more issues with that juvenile.
So as of August 1st, Orleans juvenile courts were not complying with the transparency law that went into effect. So my ask would be, are you hoping that that is discussed tomorrow comes into effect?
I imagine that's going to be at the top of the list. I've already spoken to the governor and I've spoken to the AG about what we expect to cover. Transparency will be a huge part of that. And obviously whatever actions can be taken, I hope that each action, whether it's electronic monitoring, whether it's how an inmate can be introduced into a step-down facility. If you recall, a little while ago, there's an individual who was moved into a step-down facility when the DA's office wasn't in court, when the victim wasn't in court, and then that individual escaped from that halfway house, and the former head of OJJ did not notify the public. There's been some legislation put in place, but obviously we need more teeth in that, and we absolutely need compliance from juvenile court with regards to transparency.
Can you talk about the guardrails again? What was the point of improving those?
So Rick, if you recall, in the case of Mr. Nunez, this individual found himself to be in violation of the terms and conditions of his release via electronic monitoring. And it appears that JJIC, the jail, decided to change or withdraw the condition of monitoring. That's a problem. That should not happen outside of court. That should not happen outside of a prosecutor being able to take action on something like that. And so, you know, JJIC is the jail. They're responsible for educating young people while they're in jail. They're in charge of constitutionally housing them while they are there. They should not be taking any steps to release any individuals or modify the terms and conditions of their release outside of court. And so we need to put some guardrails up to make sure that that's not happening and judges aren't finding out about it after the fact.
When it comes to electronic monitoring concerns you have, are we only seeing these issues and concerns in Orleans Parish, or is this a statewide thing?
You know, my focus is on Orleans Parish, but I can tell you electronic monitoring is a huge issue across the country and across the state. If you recall the very serious case in West Feliciana involving an adult who was tampering with his device to see if he could go unnoticed, visiting his ex-wife's home, and he took her life, right? So electronic monitoring is a statewide issue. The juvenile justice system, as far as transparency, is a statewide issue. But of course, my focus is on Orleans Parish, and the volume is higher here.
And you mentioned Mr. Nunez as an example. Are there any other cases that really stand out to you as you plead for more transparency in the criminal justice system when it comes to juveniles?
There are a number of cases that I know keep Chief Pugh up at night, keep me up at night, keep my first assistant up at night. It's not prudent or proper for me to state the names of those juveniles that are not charged as adults, but there are a number of instances, there are a number of violations that have gone unaddressed by the court, that have gone unreported, and that hasn't stopped yesterday.
Just another quick question. Do you know how many juveniles right now are in Orleans Parish that are wearing ankle monitors?
You know, that's part of why I want these hearings to happen. One, to see what standards the judges are using from section to section to put someone on electronic monitoring, and who is providing that electronic monitoring. Is it a private company? Is it JJIC? Is it OJJ? And there are a number of different rules and protocols depending upon the vendor or provider of that particular device. That's a problem. It's random. It allows individuals to fall through the cracks, and it's certainly unfair to the public and unfair to victims and survivors who are, who are under the expectation that when someone is placed on electronic monitoring, someone will be watching. Rick, you had something else?
No, I'm good.
Okay. All right.
Thank you guys very much.
Thanks, everybody.